ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम। निशुसीद गणपते गणेशु त्वामा आहुर्विप्रातमं कवीनां नरते तत्क्रियते महानारे मघवन् चित्रमर्च प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजीभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्र्यवतु। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ओम शांति शांति शांति। सांद्रानन्दावबोधात्मकमनवममितं कालदेशावधिभ्यां निर्मुक्तं नित्यमुक्तं निगमशतसहस्रेण निर्भास्यमानम् अस्पष्टं दृष्टमात्रे पुनरुरुपुरुषार्थात्मकं ब्रह्मतत्त्वं तत्तावद्भाति साक्षात् गुरुपवनपुरे हन्त भाग्यं जनानाम् एवं दुर्लभ्य वस्तुन्यपि सुलभतया हस्तलब्धे यदन्यत्तन्वा वाचा धिया वा भजति पदजनक्षुद्रदैव स्फुटेयं एते तावद्वयं तु स्थिरतरमनसा विश्वपीडापहत्यै निःशेषात्मानमेनं गुरुपवनपुराधीशमेवाश्रयामः। सत्वं यत्तत्पराभ्याम् अपरिकलनतो निर्मलं तेन तावद्भूतैः भूतेन्द्रियैस्ते वपुरिति बहुशः श्रूयते व्यासवाक्यम् तत्स्वच्छत्वाद् आच्छादितपरसुखचिद्गर्भनिर्भासि तस्मिन् धन्या रमन्ते श्रुतिमतिमधुरे सुग्रहे विग्रहे ते निष्कम्पे नित्यपूर्णे निरवधि परमानन्दपीयूषरूपे निर्लीनानेकमुक्तावलिसुभगतमे निर्मलब्रह्मसिन्धौ कल्लोल्लासितुल्यं खलु विमलतरं सत्त्वमाहुस्तदात्मा कस्मान्नो निष्कलस्त्वं सकल इति वचस्त्वत्कलास्वेव भूमन् निर्व्यापारोऽपि निष्कारणमज भजसे यत्क्रियाम् ईक्षणाख्यां तेनैवोदेति लीना प्रकृतिः असति कल्पापि कल्पादिकाले तस्याः संशुद्धमंशं कमपि तमतिरोधायकं सत्त्वरूपं सत्त्वं धृत्वा दधासि स्वमहिमविभवा कुण्ठवैकुण्ठरूपम् तत्ते प्रत्यग्रधाराधरललितकलायावली केलिकारं लावण्यस्यैकसारं सुकृतिजनदृशां पूर्णपुण्यावतारम् लक्ष्मी निःशङ्कलीलानिलयनम् अमृतस्यन्दसन्दोहमन्तस्सिञ्जत्सञ्चिन्तकानां वपरनुकलये मारुतागारनाथ कष्टाते सृष्टिचेष्टा बहुदरखेदावहा जीवभाजामित्येवं पूर्वम् आलोचितम् अजितमया नैव मद्याभिजाने नो चेत् जीवाः कथं वा मधुरतरमिदं त्वद्वपुश्चिद्रसार्द्रं नेत्रैः श्रोत्रैश्च पीत्वा परमरससुधाम्बोधिपूरेरमेरन् नम्राणां सन्निधत्ते सततमपि पुरस्तैरनभ्यर्थितानप्यर्थान् कामानजस्रं विदरति परमानन्दसान्द्रां गतिं च इत्थं निःशेषलभ्यो निरवधिकफलः पारिजातो हरे त्वं क्षुद्रं तं शक्रवाडीद्रुममभिलषति व्यर्थमर्थिव्रजोऽयम् कारुण्यात् काममन्यं ददति खलु परे स्वात्मदस्त्वं विशेषादैश्वर्यादीशदेन्ये जगति परजने स्वात्मनोऽपीश्वरत्वं त्वय्युच्चैरारमन्ति प्रतिपदमधुरे चेतना स्फीतभाग्यास्त्वं चात्मा राम एवेत्यतुलगुणगणाधार शौरे नमस्ते ऐश्वर्यं शङ्करादीश्वर विनयमनं विश्वतेजोहराणां तेजस्संहारि वीर्यं विमलमपि यशो निःस्पृहैश्चोपगीतम् अङ्गासङ्गा सदा श्रीरत् अखिलविदसि न क्वापि ते सङ्गवार्ता तद्वातागारवासिन् मुरहर भगवच्छब्दमुख्याश्रयोऽसि। ओम श्री गणेश शारदा गुरुभ्यो नमः। Shri Shivaya Gurave Namaha. So in the last session, we saw that how this Sanatana Dharma is not only is a way of life, but it is pursuit of self-identity, of self-knowledge. That is the essence of Sanatana Dharma. In the West, in the Judo-Abrahamic tradition, their dharma or their religions are supported by and sponsored by political institutions, government, and various organizations and bodies. But this Sanatana Dharma, as the name means, it has supported itself. No political institution or no one mission can claim that it has supported Sanatana Dharma. In fact, it has been supported by Sanatana Dharma. We also talked about a tree wherein small creepers creep in. So that is what this Narayaneeyam is trying to present. It is
Ajay, don't touch my screen.
Presenting this pursuit, this human pursuit. Narasya Ayanam. The human pursuit is for Brahman. That is the premise with which Narayaneeyam begins. That's what we saw in the last week. We saw how this pursuit of Brahman or Brahmacharya. Brahmavada is only in the speech level. Brahmacharya is in the body level. Charya means act. Acting in a dharmic way. That is Brahmacharya. In the body level, it is ahimsa and dharmacharana. Doing actions without hurting anybody, without the intent of hurting anybody. That we saw last week. That in the body level, kayena dharmaha means acting without hurting anybody. And at the speech level, this brahmacharyam, this pursuit of Brahman means speaking the truth. We also recognized last week that satyam is always sat and tyat. Speech is always mixed with some untruth. Knowingly or unknowingly, you utter words without an intent, but still it is mixed with falsehood. So that carefulness, that commitment to truth alone in speech is called as satyam. So at the body level, it is dharma, doing good without harming anyone, and speaking without mixing up with falsehood. For that, we have to have a rational way of talking, which is presented by Tarkashastra. Ancient Tarkashastra is also all about avoiding vada and jalpa and vidanda and talking the truth. So that we saw last week. How in the body level it is dharma, in the speech level it is satyam. And we also saw that it is ritam. In the intellectual level, brahmacharya, the pursuit of Brahman, it's nothing but this pursuit of ritam. And what is that ritam? That also we saw last week. Aham sat. That aham, that identity, the I-ness is sat, that recognition that it is Brahman. And how do you get to that identity? Shujisat. You have to be pure in mind, body, and speech. Vasurandarikshasat. It is the same Brahman which is seen around you, that recognition. Ritam Brihate, that Brihat Ritam, that experience of oneness in the Antariksha, around you and inside you, through Aikya Abhyasa. That is the practice of Ritam in the intellectual level. inside you. So in these three levels, as Ritam, as Satyam, and as Dharma, this commitment to these three is called as Brahmacharyam, or the pursuit of Brahman. And that is what this Narayaniyam presents as Brahma Tattvam. In the very first verse, Punaruru Purusharthatmagam Brahma Tattvam. That Brahma Tattvam is Purusharthatmagam. That is the pursuit of every embodied being. Not only human beings, every embodied being is going towards this experience of bigness. It wants to escape smallness. And that is the subject matter of Vedas. And as Narayaniyam says, Nigamashada, all the many Upanishads are explaining that. So the author, as we saw last week we only dealt with one phrase in Narayaniyam, that is the opening phrase. The very first phrase, that's what we saw, where the author introduces the subject matter to his listeners. And what he does with that phrase, Sandra Ananda Avabodhatmagam, is to identify himself with his ideal Lord Sri Krishna, Guruvayurappan, who he says is Brahman. He's looking at Guruvayurappan and saying, this is Brahman. And he invokes that supreme power with adjectives, with so many adjectives in the opening verse. In the opening statement, Sandra Ananda Avabodhatmagam itself is the very definition of Brahman. We saw that last week. Because the expression Sandra Ananda Avabodhatmakam means it is Atmakam. It is the explanation of Atma. And Atma is only one. Atma is Sandram, meaning it is existential. Atma is Anandam. It is always blissful, peaceful, composed, free from all sadness. And it is Avabodhatmakam. This is how he was describing and defining Atma or Brahman, which is an embodiment of everlasting bliss or never-ending bliss, positively or negatively. And it is avabodha. It is pure consciousness, pure awareness. So Bhattacharya is presenting Bhagavan as Satchidananda. That's what he did. Why? Because that is the very definition presented by Krishna Yajurveda. As we see in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Satyam Jnanamanantam Brahma Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Parame Vyoman. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Brahman is nothing but Satyam. It is eternal truth. And Jnanam, it is knowledge without limitation, supreme knowledge. And it is Anantam. It is limitless. If you call it happiness, it is limited to that object. That is why he didn't use the word Anandam. He used the word Anantam to describe, to denote Lakshanaya. Without saying it, he's saying that. That is why Brahman cannot be said by words. It is only understood through Lakshana. It's a technical term for suggestion. So this is Anantam, this is limitless. When it is known that Brahman is Anantam, which is supreme bliss, when somebody says that your Atma is supreme bliss, it is but natural that even the most ordinary fellow, he would be curious to know more about this Brahman, because he is experiencing himself as a sad person, always trying to become happy, always trying to, as they call, putting himself in the pursuit of happiness. So he wants to know this Brahman, which is unlimited happiness, and he wants to attain that state as though it is a state. So if there is a definition, if somebody can explain to it in relatable terms, it would be easy for all of us to understand that description, that definition, that lakshanam of Brahman, so that we can work towards gaining that state or that knowledge of Brahman. It will be very helpful if it can be described that this Brahman is like this. Idamitham. This is like this is like that. How by sadharmyam and vaidharmyam, by way of comparing or contrasting with something, with example, with illustrations. But then the poet says in the next phrase, Anupamitam Sandrarandavabodatmakam. There is a first adjective followed by Anupamitam. There is no upama. It is impossible to define Brahman. That's what the poet says. So he makes it clear in the beginning itself. Conclusively, you cannot explain it. And therefore, he presents the next adjective, this Anupamitam, which means this Brahman, Sadharma Vaidharmyabhyam Vilakshanam. There is no contrast or comparison possible. Because nothing is comparable. Because there is nothing which is similar in character to Brahman is found anywhere. And our Upanishads, they also clearly say this. In the Chandogya, in the 6th Khanda, 2nd chapter, 1st mantra. Sadevedamagra asid ekameva dvitiyam tasmad asatas sajayata asataha. Brahman is only one. Ekameva advitiyam. There is no second thing like this. There is nothing equal to it. There is nothing different from it. That's what the Upanishad says. The Samaveda, Chandogya. And as there is no other object that is blemishless, eternal, pure, limitless, which are the characteristics of this pure consciousness Brahman, it is clear that this Brahman, this Brahma Tattvam is unique, Vishishtam, and it is incomparable. It is Anupamitam. But then, Bhattadari is sitting there and talking about Guru Ayappan. And we also hear that there are these two entities, like Paramatman and Jivatman. We hear these words in the Upanishads. The individual soul that is embodied and which is responsible for giving life to the body. The body is thriving because of that Jivatma. And then there is an observer, like two birds sitting in a tree, the Paramatman, which is the supreme consciousness, which transcends this little bird, this Jivatma. So we hear all this in the Upanishads itself. So this leads to this question, this Purvapaksha, to ask how this Brahman is without second. How can you say it is Advitiyam when you are talking about these two birds? Then the Upanishads declare those two is explained from your body level. Because the Paramatma is omniscient and is the embodiment of Anandam, eternal bliss. But the Jivatma, which is experiencing this duality, because of its limited knowledge, and it is always limited, that limited entity is called as Jivatma. It is limited in its powers, and therefore it undergoes innumerable sufferings. Because it has not examined, it has not perfected its knowledge. It is full of imperfect knowledge. Hence, it could be argued that these entities are different. So they are one and the same, but appear as different. When their properties, their attributes are starkly opposite, opposing to each other. One is unlimited and one is limited. And the Upanishad's answer to this contradiction is that it should be understood that these two are treated differently only for vyavahara, for transaction, for teaching. In customary practice, we observe this duality. That is why for the teaching, in order to remove that duality, it's presented like that. Only in transaction, because the transaction is conditioned by self-ignorance. Because there is this duality, from that viewpoint, that perspective, Upanishad is perspective, talking about these two birds, talking about these two words, Jivatma and Paramatma. But in reality, the Jivatma and Paramatma, they are just one and the same. It is similar to the image of an object you see in the mirror. The Jivatman is nothing but the reflection of that supreme consciousness on the Chittam. That is one's own mind, one's own antakaranam, mental faculties. Mind means there are 42 different things. And this mind happens to be shrouded by the veil, by an avaranam called self-ignorance, which is called the cover of ignorance. Once this ignorance, once this covering is destroyed and it is replaced by self-knowledge, just like in a mirror, what happens? The image merges with the object, source of the image. So also the Jivatma and the Paramatma, they become one. They are one. Thus proving the oneness of these two apparently different entities. The Upanishad again says, Ekameva Advitiyam Brahman. The Brahman is Ekameva Advitiyam, means Brahman is unique. It is one without second. So these two adjectives of Narayaneeyam, the first two, are descriptions or definitions, are covered in the very first line of Narayaneeyam. In the very first line of Narayaneeyam, Sandrananda Bodhatmakam, there is one adjective, Anupamamitam. That cannot be compared. And there is one more adjective in that first line itself, Kala Deshavadibhyam, and it joins with Nirmuktam. Nirmuktam is the first word of the second line. So that is the third adjective. Kala Deshavadibhyam Nirmuktam. That it is timeless and beyond space. Kala is time. Desha is space. This consciousness, this awareness, it cannot be contained in time and space. It's beyond that. It's the cause of time and space. And what is this phrase Kala means? What does this phrase Desha means? All objects that we are able to perceive are bound by time because we perceive them in time and we perceive them in space. That is our experience. So on the basis of this experience, if you try to locate Brahman in a particular place or particular time, just like we do with all our experiences, any object you want to do it in a particular time and particular place. That's why you control it. That's why you experience it. You control that experience. But in the case of Brahman, in the case of consciousness, it would be impossible because it is the Brahman which is doing this. And hence, Brahman is beyond time and space. It is the creator of time and space. That is what he means when he says, Kala Desha Avadibhyam Nirmuktam. This avadhi, this limitation of time and space is not applicable to Brahman, which means it has neither beginning nor end. That's what it is. Anything that has got a shelf life has a beginning and end. It's a manufacturing date, it has an expiry date, and Brahman does not have. It is Anadi and Anantam. Therefore, it is Nitya Muktam. It is eternal and all-pervading. And it is not limited by Kala and Desha, time and space. One cannot say that it exists only for a short period of time, a particular period of time, in a particular area, in Dwaraka or in Kailasa. You cannot say that. Neither can you say it was born on Shivaratri or Krishna Janmashtami. When it was born and when it would end, you cannot say. The Upadhis can come and go. But Brahman itself has no birth. Krishna himself says that, Ajobisan Avyayatma, I am Ajaha, I am birthless. Janma Karamachame Divyam. My birth and my actions are divine. It is not mundane. So Brahman has no birth. It does not have this Shadvikaraha, as they call in technical language, which is the continuous growth, transformation, decay, and death. So these Shadvikaras, these 6 changes, or other similar attributes of the body that the body has, the Brahman does not have, because it is not limited by space. Therefore, it follows that Brahman is only one, and it is non-dual and pure, and it is happiness itself. That's why it is Nityamuktam. Anything that is free, it cannot be sad. It is ever free. It is never subject to limitation. Anything which is not subject to any limitations, it cannot be sad. Hence, it is Nityamuktam. So now we have come to know that there exists a thing called Brahman, and it has no vikara, it has no distinguishing marks, signs by which we can define it, features by which we can define it, describe it. So it without any marks or features or properties, which is totally contradicting our worldly human experience. Why? Because our worldly human experience is Nitya Baddham, but Brahman is Nitya Muktam. It is ever free and is never subject to any bandha or limitation. That's the meaning of Nitya Muktam. So the first line is over and part of the second line. And now the poet describes the process of knowing this tattva. Now that he has presented the subject matter of Narayaneeyam, where do I find more information? So he says, this Brahmatattvam, that is the most important subject matter of the Upanishad. That's where the importance, the prominence of the Upanishad comes into play. The Upanishads and the Nigamas are another name for Vedas. They describe the nature of Brahman. So by reading them, by looking at them, you can find more about Brahman. So basically, it's describing that the authority, the pramana, that we can trust that this Brahman exists, is derived from the Vedas. The poet brings out the authority of the Vedas, the Nigamas, by saying that Nigama Sahasrena Nirbhasyamanam, Nigama Shata Sahasrena Nirbhasyamanam. That is the next adjective. So the 2 lines are over now. Sandra Bodhatmakam Anupamamitam Kala Deshavadibhyam Nirmuktam Nityamuktam Nigamashata Sahasrena Nirbhasyamanam. Nigama Shata Sahasrena Nirbhasyamanam. Nirbhasya means being expounded, being clarified, being repeatedly explained in numerous ways in the scriptures. Shata Sahasrena Nirbhasyamanam. Shatam means 100. Sahasram means 1000. So Shatam and Sahasram in hundreds and thousands of ways. Just meant to convey that it is countless. You cannot count how many times Upanishad is talking about Brahman. So now, why should we know this Brahman? What is the purpose? What is our connection with this Brahman? There the Upanishad says, the Shweta Shvatara Upanishad, the 6th chapter, 11th verse. Eko deva sarva bhuteshu gudaha sarva vyapi sarva bhutantaratma. There is this one effulgent being, this Brahman, which is hidden in all creatures. He is Antaryami, the all-pervading, the indwelling self of all. And that is the purpose, the usefulness of knowing this Brahman, this Atman, this self, the I in all. The purpose again is explained in Chandogya, of knowing it. The purpose of this Atmajnana. The 7th Kanda, 1st chapter, 13th mantra. Tarati shokam atmavit. Atmavit shokam tarati. A knower of this self, this Brahman, this Atman, this Atma as Brahman, goes beyond shokam, grief. The sudden sadness we experience, this bitterness. He goes beyond that. That is the purpose of knowing this self, this Atman. This shokam or sadness is a basic human predicament. And this stems from self-ignorance. It stems from an identity crisis. Because of our wrong identification. We identify the self with the body, which is wrong. When you are playing the role, you should not identify with that role. You should be able to separate yourself from the role. And knowing the Atman, the self, without any doubt, makes this wrong identification go away. So this mistaken identity, the mistaken identification, that alone is the root cause of all sadness, of all shokam. And that shokam that goes away, as Chandogya says, Tarati shokam atmavit. A knower of the Atman goes beyond shokam, grief or sadness. So that is why we should know this Atma Tattva, this Brahma Tattva. We again see that in the Shvetashvatara, in the 6th chapter, 15th mantra, Tameva viditva timrutyameti nanya pantha vidyate yanaya. It's also in the Purusha Suktam. Anyaha pantha ayanaya na vidyate. By knowing this self alone, this Brahman alone, this Atman alone, one goes beyond suffering. Ati mrityumeti. There is no other way. Anya pantha na vidyate. To this ultimate purpose, goal of humanity, other than this self-knowledge. So these statements from the Vedas and the Upanishads, they are not seeking heaven or happiness. It is only seeking knowledge. That is very unique of the Upanishads. It is unlike any other religious scripture or literature, where knowing here and now what you are, that is the purpose. And the Upanishads, they establish it beyond doubt that there is this one and only reality that is called Brahman. That is why Schopenhauer called that while living, reading this literature is my solace. And he said, after death, it is going to be the cause of my peace. Because the knowledge or realization of Brahman, called Atmajnanam, or in other words, self-enlightenment, or self-awareness, self-knowledge, that alone is the ultimate solution for all sufferings caused by this duality called samsara, or this endless vicious cycle of birth and death, which the individual undergoes. Dying means forgetting the self. That's what dying means. And that individual jiva, the individual soul, the self, is forced by avidya, by ignorance. So in spiritual matters, in self-knowledge, the Vedas, the Agamas, they are the Pramana Vakyas. That's what Bhattadiri is saying. He says they are trustworthy because they are proclamation of great Maharshis, great sages, who are the final authority in the subject matter of Brahman and Atman. So though we hear these mantras time and again, we are not able to understand the Brahma Tattva merely through listening. People listen for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So what is the way to know this self intimately then? The poet himself raises this question as a Purvapaksha. That's why the third line, the beginning of third line, he says, Aspashtam. It is unclear, it is hazed after listening to it even many, many times for the majority of the seekers who continue to remain unenlightened because they are covered by this veil of ignorance. Shrouded inside is that Atmajnana. Hence, Bhattadiri says it is aspashtam, drishtamatri. When you keep hearing, listening, seeing it, it is aspashtam. Because this Brahman is covered by Maya Shakti. That covers it with this Trigunatmika Maya. That is the meaning of Maya. It is Trigunatmika. There are these three gunas. Sattvam is very pleasant. They are all states of mind, states of experience. Anything pleasant is sattvam. When you experience pleasant state, that is sattva-guna. And when you experience intense action, it is rajas. And when there is dullness, non-understanding, inertia, that is tamas. And people, the minds, as long as they are under the spell of these trigunas, they will not be able to experience the presence of this Brahman. At the same time, those who have a predominance of sattva, idichanto brahmacharyam charanti, that is what the Kathopanishad says. They commit themselves to brahmacharya so that they can get this sattva guna. What is brahmacharyam? As we saw in the body, it is dharmacharanam. In the speech level, brahmacharyam is satyacharanam. And the mental level, intellectual level, brahmacharyam is aikyabhyasam, kritam. So that is why the word Brahman means Veda. Tattvam Brahmani Yatharthye, and Brahman means Yathartham, Tattvam. So Brahman means reality, Brahman means the Vedas, and Brahman means Dharma. So that is why they do this brahmacharya, because they want to fill themselves with sattva guna. And once you are filled with sattva guna, you naturally refrain from committing rajasic and tamasic actions. Meaning, those who are brahmacharis, they do not engage themselves in binding desires or worldly pursuits ending in sensual pleasures. They merely perform their duties without getting motivated by self-centered, selfish, egocentric desires, and dedicate all their actions to Bhagavan. And by Bhagavan's grace, they get their senses cleansed of passions, of ignorance, and gain purity. So this sattva predominant life, that Bhattadiri says, is the key to gain some spashtata. So drishtamadre aspashtam, though you listen to it, hear it, look at it again and again, the understanding comes only from sattva. Punaruru purusharthatmakam. That's what he's going to say. Meaning, after receiving proper initiation, after receiving the right teaching from a traditional preceptor, they meditate on Bhagavan. Where did this traditional preceptor come? Because he uses the word Punaruru. Uru means, in Malayalam, Urudaga means to repeat. In Tamil also, Uru Podradha means to repeat. In Sanskrit, Uru means Abhyasa. Repeat again, practice. Practice after whom? After the Guru, after the teacher. Swadhyayo Dhyetavyaha. Guru says it once, you repeat it twice. That process is called as Punaruru. Like that, they meditate on Bhagavan. They meditate on this Brahma Tattva with a one-pointed mind. Then it becomes Spashtam. They practice this concept of oneness with this supreme consciousness called Brahman. And this regular practice that they do, that is explained by the words Punaha, Punaha, Uruhu. Pauna Punyena Uruhu. Punaruru means again and again. Uru means practice. So constant practice of this Brahma Tattva, it leads to Spashtatvam. Spashtata means enlightenment, clarity. Enlightenment is nothing but clearness. That is when the Brahman becomes Spashtam, it becomes clear. For all others who are not serious about this, because they have to commit their body, mind, and speech. The Vedic speech is chanting of the Upanishad. Doing dharma is at the body level. That is also a commitment to Brahman. And the commitment of rhythm in the mind, that is also a commitment to Brahman. By this, it becomes clear. Otherwise, it will continue to become aspashtam. It is unclear, blurred. So for those who do this practice, this uru, this abhyasa, it is spashtam, it is clear. This is brought out by the word Brahma Tattvam. Punaruru Purusharthatvagam Brahma Tattvam. If you do practice continuously, if you abide in this Aikya Abhyasa, this Brahman becomes clear. And this Brahman is totally separated from worldly objects like body and sensory experiences. Those experiences won't mean anything to an Aikya Abhyasa. And this word Brahman, it is derived from the root Brih. Brih means grow, to expand. Whenever you are happy, you experience that. Happiness is expanding. There is no smallness in happiness. That's why everyone wants to become happy, because he wants to be Brahman. Because Brahman means to grow, to expand, to cause to grow, to embellish, to nourish. All this is Brahman. And what causes anything to grow is Brahman. The Brahman associated with Maya, which is Bhagavan, Ishvara, that has become this Vishwam, this universe, consisting of this gross and sensual objects. And this recognition of Bhagavan in everything, that is also in the body level is Aikya Abhyasa. When we see the reflection of a tree in waters, little children, they may think that the tree is inside the water. This is because the senses give us a visual perception. But our intelligence, the intelligent person knows that it is only a reflection of the tree. Because he has arrived at that intelligence through vichara, through analysis, through investigation. Similarly, Brahman can never be limited by anything. The limitation belongs to our mind and intellect. You have this Gopika Geetam in Srimad Bhagavatam. There the gopis, they say, they had self-knowledge. Nakhalu Gopika Nandano Bhavan Akhila Dehi Nam Antarat Madruku. Hey Krishna, we know that you are not born in Vrindavana. Of course, we see you, we are attracted by your mesmerizing, mellifluous sound of flute and beautiful form. And by merely looking at you with pure devotion, we have understood your tattvam. Akhila dehinam antaratmadirke. You are that consciousness inside us. So they attained that Brahma Tattva because they were looking for that. They are looking for the true nature of Krishna. They were not worried about his Nama Rupa. So that seeking is what makes it spashtam. And there Bhagavan removed the delusion, the ignorance of the Gopikas by revealing his Swarupa. And therefore the Gopikas, they understood that his body, his actions, his leelas, they are all causes of delusions. If I have to teach Brahman, then I have to teach the Upanishads. Nigama Shata Sahasrena Nirbhasyamanam. Hundreds and thousands of Upanishad statements has to be elaborated until we gain this clarity. And in order to teach you the Vedas, which are written in Sanskrit, possibly I have to teach you Sanskrit. I have to use whichever language you know. And once you are comfortable in Sanskrit, once you become proficient in the Vedas, then you know Brahman. After that, you don't need any Sanskrit or Vedas. That was the state where Gopikas were. Because they had understood what is supposed to be understood. It has become spashtam for them. So Brahman is not connected with Vyakarana or any Vyavahara or any worldly matters. All these are in the worldly domain alone. And how again shall you know this Brahma Tattvam? Because Drishta Matra it is aspashtam. You keep on looking at it, it becomes unclear. It becomes more muddled. Your vision becomes very hazed. That is the meaning of aspashtam. It's not very clear after seeing or hearing. So Bhattadiri says this punaha uru. Keep repeating. Keep practicing. Uru means practice. By continuous practice, the mind will get an appreciation. And the Upanishads also state that in the Brihadaranyaka, in the fourth Khanda, fourth chapter, 19th mantra, Manasaiva anudrashtavyam. Brahman is to be known through the mind alone. Manasaiva anudrashtavyam. Anu means following which. Means according to the instructions of a teacher. That is the meaning of Anudrishti. So that you can clear all the doubts and see that there is no vaidharmyam, there is no contrast, there is no contradiction, there is no confusion in your vision. And if you don't clear these doubts about self, about Brahman, then what happens? Kathopanishad says that Mrityoscha mrityumapnoti. One who sees contradiction in this Brahman, one who sees duality in this Brahman, as it were, he goes from death to death. Whatever contradiction is, it is only perceived, it's only apparent, it is superimposed on it by ignorance. Because Brahman is beyond our perception, it is hardly accessible to the seeker. So keep practicing continuously, punaruru, with great devotion, with fervor, because it is easily available for the mere praying. It is ever present in Guruvayur. If you are able to go to Guruvayur like Sridhar, well and good. But otherwise, I told you last week that this Guruvayur is the body itself. This Guru Vayupuram is this human body. And Bhattadri is able to see it inside his body as well as in front, as Guruvayur Krishna. And the happiness overflowing from the mind of Bhattadiri is reflected in the spontaneous outbursts. Hanta bhagyam jananam. That is how he's ending that first verse. How fortunate human beings are that they are able to experience this consciousness in the cave of their heart, in front of the shrine, either here or there. Such easy accessibility of Brahman without undertaking any pains or not undergoing through any rituals. It is indeed the result of punyam, bhagyam, the merit of devotees, which they have acquired through previous births, so that they are exposed to this teaching. Hanta, alas, what else can I say? That's what Bhattadiri means. Even those devotees who visit the shrine for the first time, they clearly feel that they are experiencing a benign presence of viryam, a divine vitality, a chaitanyam. Because brahmacharyam is always viryam in the body level, satyam in the speech level, and rhythm in the mental level. All these three are unified in Krishna there, because he's a Balak brahmachari. He's a little boy there. It is not felt in any other temple like it is felt in Guruvayur. Because this image itself is of divine origin, as told in the legend of Guruvayur Kshetra Mahatmya. The ideal, the image which is being worshipped in Guruvayur is said to be worshipped by Krishna's forefathers. Even before Krishna was born, that Murti was worshipped by Krishna's forefathers. And it was handed down to Krishna himself. Lord Krishna himself worshipped that image of Vishnu in Dwaraka. And he gave it to Uddhava. So there is no surprise in devotees experiencing this extraordinary sensation, because it was touched by Sri Krishna himself. It's also pointed out that there is this, anybody who has this desire of emancipation, freedom, moksha, merely by visiting Guruvayur, they can gain it. And in the case of our own poet, Bhattadiri, he came to Guruvayur with the firm belief that worshipping of Guruvayurappan will give him freedom from this disease. That worship is the supreme medicine for getting cured of his physical ailment, which was paralysis, which he had voluntarily accepted from his guru, Achyuta Pisharadi. He was his grammar student. And at the time of giving Guru Dakshina, he understood the Guru's problem. He saw that he was suffering from this paralysis. So he accepted it in his own body. And he went to Guruvayur. That's what the legend says. And the word Guruvayupura or Guruvayur, it also means the town of Guruvayur. But if you split it into two, Guru and Vayupura, the word Guru, it becomes an adjective qualifying the noun Vayupura. So Guru or Brahman and Pavanapura, which means the body, which is support of these 5 pranas, 5 vital vayus, 5 vital airs. Together they are called as Vayu or Pavana. Guru Pavanapura, Guru Vayupura. And when we equate this with the expression as given in the Vedas, it follows that Brahman, the supreme preceptor, the Jagat Guru, Krishna, he is present. That is why Bhattadiri says, Hanta Bhagyam Jananam. We have got this human birth, this opportunity to know oneself. Hence, we should practice and understand Guru Ayappan, who is the Antaryami of all. स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महिं महीषा गो ब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम।